Shannan Watts was a ball of love, someone everyone wanted to be friends with. Dedicated to ensuring that her family had the best possible life, Shannan valued her husband, Chris, and her daughters, Bella and Celeste, better known as Cece, above anything else. Known for her selflessness, Shannan always put her family's needs before her own and was willing to do whatever it took to ensure that they had the best life. Her devotion to her husband and children was unwavering. In 2018, Chris and Shannan Watts lived in Frederick, Colorado, along with their 2 daughters. To Shannan's loved ones, watching her videos of Bella and Cece was an absolute joy. She sold nutritional supplements and patches, and Chris worked for an oil and gas company. Although Chris seemed to be a loving husband and father, Shannan's friends had difficulty connecting with him. Chris always seemed withdrawn. He was Shannan's best friend, and she credited him with giving her a fulfilling life. She was in love with Chris and described him as the best thing that had ever happened to her. Her dreams had come true, and she was so thankful to Chris for making them a reality. On May 29, 2018, Shannan informed Chris that she was expecting her 3rd child. Later, she posted the video clip to Facebook.
We did it again. I like that shirt. Really?
Really?
That's awesome. So pink means...
That's just the test.
I know. It just says the pink is going to be girls.
I don't know. Just the test.
That's awesome. Guess when you want to, it happens.
After Shannan and Chris announced their pregnancy, they discovered they were having a boy and decided to name him Nico. Shannan thought it would be impossible for her to have any more children, so she was thrilled to learn she was pregnant again. However, Chris was not quite as enthusiastic as Shannan. He appeared overwhelmed and did not appear to welcome the news of a 3rd child. In the summer of 2018, Shannan and her daughters, Bella and Cece, visited family in North Carolina. By that time, Shannan and Chris had had a hard time getting along. While Shannan was away, Chris hadn't contacted her, and when she talked to him, he claimed everything was fine and that he was just busy at work. Chris flew to North Carolina to be with Shannan and his daughters at the end of July. Despite the girls' excitement, their father was very disinterested when he saw them and their mother. Shannan texted her friends to let them know how Chris had changed. The reason for Chris's disconnect was that, back in Colorado, he secretly had a girlfriend named Nicole Kessinger, one of his co-workers whom Shannan had no idea about. Chris's relationship with Nicole had grown in recent months, and he had become increasingly distant from Shannan. When Chris's family was in North Carolina, he lived a bachelor's life. While Chris was enjoying life like a single man, his worried pregnant wife was miles away, worried about the state of their marriage, convinced she had done something wrong to disappoint him. She was seeking a way to connect with Chris, who refused to touch her or attend counseling. However, Shannan valued family more than anything else and would fight for it no matter the cost. After Shannan returned from North Carolina in 2018, she headed out for a business trip. She traveled to Arizona to spend time with her close friends. While out to dinner one night with her friends, Shannan was lamenting about her failing marriage to Chris when she received an alert from the bank. There was a charge at a restaurant for a meal for 2 people. Shannan was catching on to what Chris was doing. The last time Shannan's friends dropped her off at the Arizona airport, they embraced as if something deep inside told them they would never see her again. On Monday, August 13, 2018, Shannan returned home, determined to save her marriage. Her friend Nicole Actison picked up Shannan from the airport and dropped her off at the house at around 1:48 a.m. The video camera on her doorbell captured Shannan's final moments. As Shannan's friends awoke on August 13th, they expected to see Shannan's usual, "Good morning, beautiful," text, but they didn't. They weren't there. Since Shannan had a 9 a.m. OBGYN appointment, it was concerning that none of her friends had heard from her. According to Shannan's friend, it would have taken an act of God to keep her from going to her doctor that day because her children were everything to her. Nicole Atkinson, Shannan's friend, drove to her house, but it was sealed tight. She contacted Chris at work, telling him she was concerned and calling the police, saying he needed to get home so they wouldn't have to break into his house. Chris told Shannan's friends not to involve the police, but Shannan's friends ignored him anyway and called 911. The Frederick police officer had his body camera turned on when he arrived at Chris and Shannan's house, and the footage captured the entire exchange between him, Shannan's friends, and Chris Watts. As the officer approached Nicole Atkinson outside Shannan's house, her concern was evident. She was concerned about her best friend. Chris Watts, however, seemed totally unconcerned about the whereabouts of his wife and children. Eventually, Chris let the officer into the house, where he searched and discovered several bed sheets were missing. Nicole assisted the officer in searching Shannan's home, while Chris loitered around in the corner. After Nicole found Shannan's cell phone and purse with important medication, Nicole and the officer became even more concerned for Shannan's safety. Shannan and Chris's neighbor had an external security camera facing their home. The officer asked the neighbor to view the security camera footage that showed Chris Watts leaving his home at around 5:17 a.m. Chris opens the garage, and some movement occurs outside of view. Watching the footage on the neighbor's television, Chris stood with the officer, and the officer noted Chris's demeanor had changed. The officer thought Chris's nervous behavior was a big red flag, and wondered what was in the footage making him so tense. Shannan's family was ready to head to Frederick, Colorado to look for her, but Chris prevented them from doing so. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation got involved and drove to Frederick on August 14th to find out if Shannan had taken Bella and Celeste and left Chris voluntarily. Investigators canvassed the neighborhoods and asked Shannan and Chris's neighbors for information, but they did not hear or see anything. As the cadaver dogs scoured the family's home, one handler remarked that the place smelled of cleaning supplies and was just too clean. The K9 handler suspected that someone was trying to hide something. While the investigators searched his home, Chris gave an interview to the media, but his behavior only further raised suspicions. Although his wife and 2 daughters had not been heard from for days, Chris appeared cold and uncaring. He didn't seem to care much about their return home, as if he knew his pleas would go unanswered. According to Chris Watts, during his first FBI interview, he denied having cheated on Shannan. The agent interviewing Chris thought that the husband wasn't telling the truth. However, Chris claimed he would never hurt his 2 beautiful daughters and his wife. After 3 hours of interrogation, the FBI agents let Chris go because they had no evidence against him. However, before Chris left the police station, he made arrangements to return for a polygraph test the following morning. At that point in the investigation into Shannan, Bella, and Cece's disappearance, Chris's co-workers had informed investigators about his affair with Nicole. During his polygraph, the examiner asked Chris if he knew where Shannan was, if he physically caused her disappearance, and if Chris lied about the last time he saw her. Afterward, the polygraph examiner explained that a score of -4 and below was used to determine someone was deceptive. Chris Watts scored -18. Next, the investigators attempted to get a confession from Chris Watts and find out where Shannan and her daughters were. Chris admitted to the affair with Nicole and said the test possibly showed deceit since he emotionally hurt Shannan, not physically, yet investigators kept questioning him. They discussed different theories, and one investigator suggested it might have been Shannan who did something to the girls, and Chris's eyes lit up. Soon after that, Chris asked for a conversation with his father. When Chris's dad met with him in the interrogation room, Chris told him he came home and Shannan hurt the girls, and in a fit of rage, he had to kill Shannan in self-defense. Despite knowing Chris wasn't revealing the entire truth, investigators charged him with murder and got him to tell them where Shannan, Bella, and Cece were buried. He told investigators that he buried Shannan's body near his work site and stuck his daughters in oil drums. After Chris's arrest, he continued to deny hurting Bella and Cece, but the investigators never thought Shannan murdered them. Chris Watts accepted a plea deal that gave him a life sentence instead of the death penalty. When Shannan's father spoke at his sentencing hearing, he described his ex-son-in-law as a heartless monster. According to the judge, Chris committed one of the most inhumane crimes he had ever seen. Chris's girlfriend Nicole told investigators she had nothing to do with the murders of his pregnant wife and daughters. She described herself as a woman in the middle. While Nicole is not believed to have been involved in Shannan, Bella, or Cece's murders, she may have been the prime motivation for Chris's crime. In 2019, investigators who interrogated Chris Watts during his confession visited him in prison, where he provided a detailed confession of what occurred the day Shannan, Bella, and Cece died. When Shannan returned home from Arizona after her business trip, Chris told her for the first time that he was having an affair. Shannan then told him she was taking the kids. Even though Shannan pleaded with him to get off and that Chris was harming the baby, he got on top of her and strangled her. After killing his wife, Chris then admitted to waking up his daughters and driving them to his work site with Shannan's body in the back seat. Once Chris had reached the location where he intended to dispose of his family's bodies, he killed his daughters, one by one, and threw their bodies into oil drums. Leaving his pregnant wife and unborn son in the grave, Chris then drove off and continued working as if nothing had happened. It angered Shannan's friends and family that Chris thought he was entitled to take her, Bella, and Cece from those they loved. They missed them terribly. Shannan was an excellent mother, a dedicated wife, a caring daughter, and a dear sister. She had been so excited to have another baby and was filled with love and happiness. Shannan was looking forward to Bella and Cece becoming Nico's best big sisters. Unfortunately, after Shannan, Bella, and Cece were killed, their survivors, including Shannan's father, received hate mail and threats. Shannan's father took to the media to plead with the online trolls to leave his family alone after the harassment became so bad. He called their actions cruel and heartless. However, on the other side of the public, Shannan's friends and family received a great deal of support from people who knew and didn't know them. Shannan's friends continue to receive letters of support. Many women have said Shannan's story inspired them to leave their abusive partners. Messages like that outweigh negative ones tenfold. Chris Watts thought he had committed the perfect crime, but didn't count on Shannan's bond with her friends. Nicole Atkinson's persistence allowed investigators to gain access to Shannan and Chris's home well before Chris had a chance to dispose of any evidence. If the investigative team had not been able to get into the house at that time, Chris might very well have been able to get rid of Shannan's purse and cell phone. If that had happened, Chris easily could have made a case that Shannan ran away with Bella and Cece, which would have made it much more challenging for investigators to prove his guilt. Chris Watts made a big mistake by doubting his wife's loyalty, dedication, and incredible qualities, which gave him a life sentence.